All right. Well, before I go into the um, welcome, are there any questions from the group ahead of time? All right, hearing none. I think with 22 participants, it'll be a good idea for us to allow people to just briefly introduce themselves. And I'd personally like to hear um, from each person if you have something that you'd like to get out of the meeting today after looking at the agenda. If you don't have anything, you don't have to make it up to just to save us time. But if you do have something you'd want to make sure that we hit during the meeting today, now is your chance. And then the other thing, we do have a list of people who are planning on attending the in-person meeting on November 30th and December 1st. I think it would be beneficial to us. We kind of recently decided we're going to allow people to at least listen in and potentially participate in the discussion if they aren't able to make it in person. So also just briefly what your plans are for the November 30th and December 1st meeting, if you're going to be able to participate either in person or remotely. I think that'll be kind of nice to get from this technical working group. So I have an idea and we have an idea on what type of participation from the experts is, which is what I consider you guys here in this group. So Vanessa, do you want to go down the list and call on people?
Sure, I'll do that. So let's start with Irvin.
Okay. Irv Ducatz, Fire ELD Consulting. I'm planning on attending the meeting in November. Retired contractor and also chair of a TRB workshop at this year's or next year's 2023 TRB meeting on implementation of DPS. And it'll be a Thursday morning interactive workshop. I encourage all to participate, and we will try to answer the great question of why contractors and agencies should be implementing DPS. I think we have a great group of speakers from both sides of the table to discuss why they think it should be implemented, and we have some that are not so sure why they should get involved with it. And then the attendees will be asked to answer a few questions on what they think will help them move forward with implementation. Thank you.
Serve. And then you're in person for the meeting on November 30th, December 1st,
Yes,
right?
in person. That is correct.
Yeah.
Brandon.
Hello, everyone. Brandon Braver here. I'm with the Minnesota Asphalt Pavement Association. And yeah, I guess I'm hoping to get out of this how the DPS can be implemented for contractors. And I guess just looking at the agenda, another one I was interested in was just the limitations, risks, different research needs, things like that. Thank you.
Any
Thanks, Brandon.
attendance at the winter meeting, Brandon? Or what's the plans? I know you got MAPA that on the
Yeah, I
first.
was gonna say we have our own committee meetings on the 30th, and then we have our December 1st conference for our asphalt association. So I don't believe I'll be able to attend.
We'll have meeting notes for you.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay, over to Brian. I think that's you, Brian Hurt.
Good morning. I'm Brian Hurt, Managing Director with CTC and Associates. Our firm, as you know, is assisting with communication for this pool fund. I will be attending the fall meeting and assisting with meeting facilitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Brian Diffin, oh, it's cut off, Diffenderfer. Diefenderfer, okay, my ellipses were cut off.
No worries.
The rest
no
of
worries.
your name.
So, yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm Brian Diefenderfer. I work for the Virginia Transportation Research Council. And my plan is to attend in person the meeting here at the end of the, I guess, end of the month, beginning of next month. Well, sorry, end of November, beginning of December.
Yep.
And as far as things I'm planning to get out, I'd like to get out today. I've got a couple of questions in the presentation I'm going to give. So I'm looking forward to any feedback and comments on those.
Super, thank you. Chuck.
Is that Chuck Oden?
Yeah, Chuck Oden. I think I just lost him, so I'll go over to Craig. If you're speaking, we can't hear you. Going on to Dale. And if anyone has issues with the audio, just chat, please.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Dale Peabody, Maine DOT. I do plan on attending virtually the first day of the meeting coming up the end of next month. And as far as today's work, yeah, I'm glad you've got UNH on the agenda. They've been doing some interesting work with the DPS in a lab environment for bulk specific gravity. So I think that's some interesting work. I'm curious what other folks will have to say. I think about that. That might be a good way to help with implementation of the technology itself. Thank you.
Yeah, and Dale, the presentation today will be mostly on the field analysis tools they've been developing, but then in the November 30th, December 1st, they'll definitely touch on the bulk
Cool.
specific gravity stuff
Yeah.
too. So yeah,
Great.
thank you.
Thanks, Carl.
Thanks, Dale. I'm gonna go back up to Craig.
Can you hear me now?
We can, or I can.
Sorry, I'm having all kind of machine difficulties this morning. I'm not sure what's going on. Craig Londefeld, Ohio DOT. It's good to see a lot of the folks from the group on here again today. Just hoping that we can keep chugging along with some of this stuff, and interested to see what some of the data that Kyle and you guys have collected this year. I'm planning to be at both TRB, Kyle, and the meeting upcoming at the end of next month, but still don't have approval. So think that'll happen, but hope to be there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. And we're hearing from Chuck on the chat. He's Chuck Oden with ESS. He says we're DPS equipment vendor, and he is planning on attending the meeting at the end of the month. He's got a bit of difficulties with his microphone. Thanks, Chuck, for typing that in. Over to Dennis.
Hello, this is Dennis DeVork. I'm with the Ohio Administration Resource Center. I'll be attending the meeting at the end of the month virtually. I'm looking forward to hearing lots of good things at this meeting, as well as that meeting where we're headed with DPS, primarily more in the QC area.
Thank you, Dennis. Fabrizio.
Good morning. Well, I started working with this project with Kyle and I when I was at NCAT, Auburn University. And I have been involved in the development of precision and bias statements and analysis of variability. I do plan to attend in November the meeting, and hopefully at TRB. And I hope to continue working, especially on implementation on my next phase, which is going to start in January with Clemson. So we'll see how that goes. Thank you.
Thanks, Fabricio. Harold.
Vanessa, is that Harold Von Quinnis?
That is.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's Harold Von Quinnis with Applied Research Associates, working part-time and not in the too distant future, hopefully to be retired. So I will not be able to attend in person at the November meeting. I have a conflict in South Carolina. But I'm going to try to attend day 2 virtually.
Great. And I don't want to go too far extending over our 10-20 plans for this agenda, but I did find what you sent me this morning interesting, Harold, and I wonder now might be a good time just to share a little bit about the work
Sure.
done that's related to both topics 3 and 4 for our umbrella groups.
Right. We're working on, and there are, looking through here, there are individuals in which I thought was the case that are on the panel of NCHRP 10108, which is on the use of non-destructive testing for quality assurance. And we're on the tail end of the project. So the guidance manual has been prepared. It's been reviewed. We're supposed to get the comments this week, I believe, talking from Iman. And the guidance manual includes some draft standard practices, one of which is on the DPS for acceptance. And I'm sure there's going to be comments on that. But the final report's been, I should say the draft final report's been submitted. And so I was hoping after we get comments back on the guidance manual and the standard practices, depending on how extensive they are, that I'll be able to send those to the group with the approval of NCHRP as well as the panel. I know Dale is, I believe, the chairman of that panel. So even if we don't make it by the end of November, I think he should be able to have all the information on that. So we're kind of in the home run stretch, and we're hoping to have, the other thing I was going to mention too is there are 2 webinars that we're going to be putting on, as well as an ASHTO presentation. And I think the ASHTO presentation is going to be the comp TS5C. At least that's what we recommended. And I have coordinated with Kurt to see about the November 8th midterm getting on the agenda there. And I didn't think that was going to be possible, but Kurt did reply back that it may be possible. So we haven't worked all the details out yet, but hopefully either November the 8th or slightly there or sometime thereafter, we'll have a presentation to Comp 5 TS5C. And then 2 additional webinars that will be scheduled either in December or early next year on the product from NCHRP 10108. There is also an implementation plan that was prepared I did have, it's been done. I haven't submitted it formally to NCHRP yet because I wanted to see what kind of comments we were going to get back on the guidance manual and the standard practices before we submit formally submit the implementation plan. I think that's it. I guess
Yeah.
if Dale has any comments, that would be okay.
Anything, Dale?
None for me. I'm not sure what panel I'm chair of though.
I may be getting the NCHRP projects confused, but this was NCHRP 10-108.
No, that's not me.
Oh, must be a
Oops.
different Dale then. Sorry about
Sorry
that,
about that,
Dale.
Harold.
Sorry, Dale.
Yeah.
Good, how are
no.
you?
We got the meat of what we wanted from you though,
Okay.
Harold. So yeah, I think that I wanted to make sure we heard from Harold before because I know he's double or triple booked here this morning, so we might have to drop off later.
Right.
But what he had to say will kind of come into play with when we start to discuss on the generating ideas for TWG report out. Some of the content they're generating is going to be considered for sharing with a larger group in November, December. So thanks, Harold.
Thank you.
Okay, over to Jeff.
Yeah, my name is Jeff Withy. I'm with the Federal Highway Administration. My purpose today is just kind of sitting in and understanding what this group is working on. And I'll probably be attending at least some of the end of November meeting virtually.
Super, thank you. Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie Johnson with CTC and Associates. I'm helping out with the communications. I'm taking notes today on today's meeting, and later this month I'll be in person to take notes and help with facilitation there.
Thanks, Katie. Matt.
Hi, this is Matt Oman with Matthew Construction. I have plenty of experience pushing a cart around and collecting and analyzing data. So I've been working with Kyle on and off for the last couple of years. So I'd like to continue doing that, but hear some updates just to see how others are experiencing this and what their thoughts are as we move forward. As for November 30th, I will be there presenting on that day. I'm double booked on the 1st, so I may or may not be there for part of that. And I'm also double booked for the TRB, and I've talked with her about that. So, but I will be participating as much as I can. And for the TRB, I'm planning on preparing a presentation, whether we deliver that somehow with another speaker. That's what we're trying to figure out. So looking forward to this.
Thank you. Lisa McDaniel.
Hi, I'm Lisa McDaniel. I'm also with the Federal Highway Administration, and I go through the technology to support it. See if we can do to get it implemented. And I hope to attend the second day of the meeting. I'm not sure about the first.
Virtual, okay. Thank you. Mercedes.
Mercedes Kuznia, MnDOT. I will be attending in person. Thank you.
Thank you. Monica.
Hello, good morning. My name is Monica Jurado, and I'm an FHWA Resource Center Payment and Materials Engineer. And I usually work with the DPS through the FHWA Loan Equipment Program. So I'm here to see what our stakeholders are doing with the units, and to help implement and collect some of the best practices in order for us to incorporate such technology into the stakeholders programs. Thank you.
And will you be attending the event at the end of the month?
Yes, I'll be there in person.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, Rebecca.
Hi, yeah, good morning. This is Rebecca. I also work for the Minnesota Department of Transportation. I've worked with some of you here with some of the other intelligent construction technologies, the intelligent compaction, thermal profiling, e-ticketing, the material delivery management system. So that's kind of where my involvement is with connection and deployment of different technologies in construction. And then I'm also the TL for the various pooled funds we've had for the funding of the Veda software.
Super, and you're going to make it to the end of to the meeting at the end of the month?
Maybe part of it on day one, but I'm also, as Brandon was talking about, I'll be at one of the technical meetings there on the first day, and then also gone at the conference there on day two. So, so part of day one possibly.
Great, thank you. Richard Hamilton.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Rich Hamilton from Advanced Testing. I'm Technical Services Manager, and we're working with New York State DOT to help facilitate the implementation of the DPS throughout the state. I am planning on attending the meeting, the winter meeting in person, and I'm looking forward to learning more about these data tools developed by UNH. Thank you.
Thank you. Roger Roberts.
Roger Roberts from GSSI. We make the DPS equipment. I'm curious to hear the experiences today from everybody, especially experiences where things didn't go quite as expected. Thank you.
And your attendance at the meeting?
Oh, yes, and I'll be there live in November.
Super. Dai.
Yeah, my name is Xiongtao Dai. I work with Minda and work with Kyle on this DPS Pooled Fund study. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone to come to today's meeting and look at the crowd today. I can see this technology has attracted a lot of interest from agencies and other states. So what I'd like to see today is to hear your feedback on this DPS device and also the pool fund study. Any comments on how to move this pool fund move forward and also move this device to implementation. Hopefully I can see most of you in the November's meeting at the Minnesota face-to-face meeting. We'll haven't had this face-to-face meeting since the project started 3 years ago. So this excited to see some of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Dai. And I believe you're going to the meeting.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I got you as a yes. Perfect. Steve Cooper.
Yeah, hey guys, I definitely plan on being there face to face. And as far as today's meeting, part of the agenda in November is talking about the technical working group report outs. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts today on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ulrich.
Good morning, I'm Ulrich Amusgenu. I work with Main DOT. I'm planning on attending the meeting of end of November, beginning of December in person. For today's meeting, I'm more interested in the topic 2, which is precision, bias, and accuracy. But other than that, I will go with the flow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I've got Brian Nagel that I missed
hey
you.
guys.
Yes.
Yeah, there we
Hi.
go. Good morning. Brian Nagel with Caterpillar. I'm sort of a product and application specialist. I have a lot of interest in technologies and where things are going in the industry. So it's kind of my role at CAT, and yes, I'll be attending in person.
Super. Thank you. Looking at the list. Oh, we've got Adam.
Good morning. This is Adam Hand at UNR. Sorry for my tardiness.
Will you be attending the meeting at the end of the month?
Yes.
Great. And I believe I have everyone, but if I've missed someone, please let us know. Oh,
Rich Giesel's here.
oh, Rich, okay.
I will be attending the end of November meeting, and I'm with Alaska DOT, still trying to get a project where we're using the DPS for acceptance. I'll give you nibbles at least for stuff for next year, so we'll see.
Still targeting airports?
Airports and just longitudinal joints at this point, going for the easy, low-hanging fruit.
Thanks, Rich. Anyone else?
All right. I think I'm going to grab the screen very quickly and then we'll get into Brian's presentation. I did want to just really quickly go through some of the stuff we went over in our last meeting. So just a quick reminder for the group. So this was our June 12th meeting. We had a lot of the same people here and went through some of the on-site software. Training is key. That's, you know, giving some examples of how the technology can be used to actually fix some workmanship issues, which is really one of the major goals of this technology, to help us get information to the contractors when they're building the pavement to improve from the very beginning. So and also went through some of the more detailed applications using Veda software, where we can bring in some of the other intelligent construction technologies like thermal and intelligent construction or compaction and things like that, and saw some really good examples and highlights of being able to identify what in the construction process was causing the low density locations and getting those fixed. So not those specific spots, but the operation that was leading to the lower densities. And then Fabricio actually did a great presentation on the DPS certification and some of the work he did at NCAT. And then that's actually going to be a topic that Dennis is going to expand upon today. And then we went through some of the challenges, and Robert also, Hinman, expanded on some of those and some potential solutions for this technology. So, but we're already 11 minutes into Brian's presentation. So, but we'd like to be as informal as possible while making sure people have their time. So definitely, Brian, don't feel rushed. We have some kind of buffers in there for discussion and things like that. So go ahead and give your full presentation, Brian, if you don't mind.
Thanks, Kyle. I think I have some ability in here to help things along. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to share what we've been working on. So Kyle asked me to talk a little bit about our initial evaluation of the DPS system. And the one we are in particular using is the one from GSSI. And I'm also working, some of you may know him, Hari Nair, who's, I think he's traveling to, I don't know, maybe Salt Lake City today, but anyway, Hari and I have been working together in this project so far. So a little bit of background about what we've been doing. We've got a decent history, I think, with GPR in general, a little more than 15 years using it for looking at bridge surveys, bridge decks, pavements, things like that. And last year we purchased, using stick funding from Federal Highways, so thank you to those folks, the RDM unit, again from GSSI. And we were able to do some testing on 5 field projects last year after getting that piece of equipment as part of a phase 1 study. And then this year, phase 2, running between 2022 and 2023, we added the MDM unit, which is, I guess, the lab-based version of the RDM. And so in the presentation here, I'll call this the RDM/L or -L. And we've assessed 6 field projects this year with that. And the last one was last week, and we're getting kind of cold here, so hopefully that was the last one for this season. So in terms of these two phases, the very first phase that we did last year was basically just to investigate the use of the DPS, develop some procedures and things like that. We looked at multiple projects and multiple mixture types. And by mixture types, I'm talking specifically nominal max aggregate sizes, different ones of those. It's mainly 9.5 and 12.5 millimeter mixes we did last year. And compared the DPS results with field core density values. For phase 2, what we're working on now is we're trying to incorporate the lab component. So we're doing kind of the same thing as we did last year for all the projects in this phase 2, comparing the DPS results with the field core density, but we're also going through and adding, and again, you see the abbreviation I use, the DPSL, the lab-based version with lab pill density. What I'll show here in just a little bit is kind of where we're heading. Our intent is to compare the DPSL device, field cores, and lab pills to see what kind of differences there are. And so while we're doing the collection in the field, we're also collecting loose mix out of the paver, boxing that and bringing it back to the lab to do to create these lab pills. So I also wanted to go through, just in case there are some agencies or other folks out there that haven't done the work, I thought it might be good to try to outline how we're conducting the testing. So when we're conducting the testing, we go out to a particular project and we are walking basically right behind the contractor lab, the contractor density technician. And so unfortunately, by doing that and trying to work within I guess whatever their existing lane closure is, we're assessing small pieces at a time, which again, we add that together later on in Excel. So we're scanning initially a 300 to 500 foot section to select the core locations. And the way we've been doing it so far is we've been doing both the left and the right side of the lane. And so since the antenna or the DPS unit has 3 antennas, we're getting 6 readings across the lane width. So we're using the feature in the software to select the core locations. So since we're doing 3 high, 3 medium, and 3 low dielectric values from the left and from the right side, we're getting 18 points. And unfortunately, right now we're doing all that. We're writing all that down by hand to pick the 9 that we want to get out of that. So we're just trying to get as big a range as we can. One thing it would be nice to do, I guess, to have that core selection feature to be able to do it across multiple files. That might be a nice thing to add. I don't know how difficult that is to do, but anyway. While we're doing that process, some of the rest of our group is sampling from the paver. We're sampling 4 boxes, usually about 60 to 65 pounds per box. And we're going to use this to make our lab pills. We can probably collect less than that, but right now that's what we're collecting just to make sure we have enough mix. Then once we select those 9 locations to do our core locations, we measure the dielectric value at each one of those. And then while some of the folks are coring, we're pushing the cart for the rest of the project and collecting somewhere between 500 and 1,000 foot segments, again, as the contractor moves along. And then so far, just because I haven't been smart enough to try to figure out how to use the Veda software yet, I'm doing everything right now in Excel. And so I'm just adding those segments together in Excel manually. A couple of photos just for fun to show what we're doing. The particular project here, the photograph on the left shows how we are doing the testing. Again, starting on the left side of the lane, go up for whatever our distance is, and then come back and then push the cart back up to the right side of the lane. So we're getting 6 scans across the lane. Right now, we're doing about 2 feet between antennas. So on a 12-foot lane, we've got, if you come in 1 foot from the edge, we've got a pretty consistent spacing across. And one question that I'm curious to hear how other people are doing, and I don't know if anybody, my cursor show up on here. There, if people can see my cursor, one thing when we try to do the testing is we try to either line up, depending on the width of the lane, the edge of the bar here or the edge of the antenna visually from the operator standing here across an angle like that to the longitudinal joint or to the edge of the pavement, depending on which side we're on, just to try to maintain some consistency. So I'm curious to how close other folks are measuring up to the edge. And then the image there on the right is showing some of the results, which shouldn't be too big a surprise to anybody else. One thing that I guess that did surprise us maybe more, if you could see these intermittent spikes in the data. And again, keeping in mind that we're doing this pretty close to when the roller is completing their testing, we found that any little spots like this of water on the roadway kind of resulted in these little periodic spikes in the data. So again, I think that's more of a phenomenon of when we're doing the testing. If someone were to come back and do the testing, let's say the next day, I wouldn't expect this to be a big deal. And it's really not a big deal for what we're doing, but just something we noticed within the data collection. And a couple other photos. This is Hari doing the testing. So again, you see in this picture on the upper left, he's eyeballing where the antenna is with respect to the center line joint. And then in the picture there on the lower right, Hari's going up the right side of the pavement. And again, trying to do the same thing, keep the antenna close to the edge, but not over top of it. So we've been somewhere between, I'd say probably 6 inches to 12 inches away from the actual edge, knowing that the antenna has a spread, I guess a spread to the beam energy coming out from the antenna. But I'm curious if there's any official recommendation on where we should be doing that. So the next step, how we do the work, once we get back to the lab, we take each core that we have, and we're measuring the bulk specific gravity of each core, and we're doing this according to AASHTO T166. So we're not doing the vacuum sealing method. We calculate the air voids using the daily Rice value from the plant, the GMM value. So we get that while we're out there on each field project, and we're using, again, that daily Rice value from the plant. And then we calculate the percent air voids and percent density from that. We plot the core dielectric value that I mentioned back in step 4 a couple slides ago versus the percent air voids. It develops that regression equation that you've seen before. And then we plot, and this is what I've been calling a regress density versus distance. And so another question that I have is what's the nomenclature everybody's using for this? Are you just calling it density, or are you calling it regress density? I've been calling it percent maximum regress density, but maybe that's too confusing a term, but terminology is a thing to keep consistent. So I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing too. This slide shows for 4 particular projects that regression equation. And so I think I used, looking at it now, I think I used the same scale for all 4 plots. So you can see where that regression line moves back and forth a little bit depending on the project. And so to me, the first thing that we saw from this is you certainly can't use the same regression equation for each mixture. Each mixture that we tested, we had different nominal max aggregate size. I think we had 2 nominal max aggregate sizes across 5 projects, but we had different contractors from different areas of the state. And knowing we had different aggregate types, dye-based materials versus limestone versus granite. So I'm sure the dielectric properties of those are different. So that's why it's not too surprising to me that the dielectric value or the dielectric constant shifts one way or the other, depending on the project. So I guess for us, that was kind of the first thing that we found, was that you need to set up this unique relationship for each project. Then I want to show a couple of example slides of how we're using the data right now. So this particular project was on a 4-lane divided primary route project we tested last year. And you can see here in the image on the left, the way they did the overlay here. I guess to keep the rumble strips in place without having to recreate those, they actually milled a slot and then placed the asphalt overlay within that slot. So we really had a confined edge on both sides of the pavement. And then the picture there on the right, you can see the pushing the cart up the right side of that particular lane. So in this case, again, both the left side and the right side were really on a confined edge. So the results from this particular project, again, if we had 6 data points going across or 6 antenna readings going across the width of the lane from the left to right, number 1 through 6, and this is how I've been able to keep it consistent by trying to do this the same way every time. You can see here, if I look at the blue shaded lines, that's the left side of the pavement. The green shaded lines are the right side of the pavement. So number 1 being the left edge, you can see is kind of in the middle of that distribution with the average somewhere around maybe 92.5% density. However, you can see that the right edge is way down there towards about 89%. And this particular project was interesting because as we went along doing our segments, this I guess this trend was kind of the same throughout the whole project, or the part that we assessed. We tested about a half a mile or so. And I walked over to the density technician from the contractor and asked him, I said, hey, are you seeing this in the density data that you're collecting the nuke gauge? He said, oh yeah. He said, we're seeing it too. He said, we've got a new guy on the screed, and every now and then he's starving the right edge of the screed. And so that was kind of interesting to me, something that the contractor, had they had this data, probably would have been able to correct on the fly, and we wouldn't have, I don't know how long the project was, but I'm sure it was probably consistent. This issue, at least it was for the maybe half mile or so that we tested, but I have a feeling it was more than just a half a mile. So again, both edges were confined, but because of the operator on the back of the screed, we have this lower average density on the right side of the lane. So same data, I just knocked out 2 of the middle scans just so you could see it a little easier. We had pretty good, I would say, uniformity here in between the center of the lane, maybe the left and the right side of the center, and then this thin blue line is the left edge, and the thin green line is the right edge of the pavement, again, for the reason I mentioned earlier. And then the next slide is just showing kind of similar data. However, this is showing with respect to distance rather than a distribution. And so you can see, again, in this case, the right edge, same deal or same issue, a lower density compared to everything else. And, you know, after looking at this data for just a few minutes, you can start to see kind of a repeating pattern. And I put some arrows on each one of those. And if you calculate the distance between each one of those and figure out the tonnage based on the thickness they were placing that day, just about every truck results in a low density area. So again, more interesting information to come out of this. The contractor was using a remixing device, but not a full MTV. And so I was still surprised to see this much variability, but again, you can see there's a lower density basically at every truck coming into the paver. And so when we report this data for, I guess right now it's for our purposes, we're not doing more with it than that, but this is how I'm reporting it. I'm showing a couple of different plots of the distribution of the information. You can see a cumulative distribution there on the upper right, and then again that same plot. Is this? I don't know if this is in the way or not, but anyway, the same plot there across the bottom. I'm calling it again regressed percent maximum density with respect to distance along the project. So in this case, we measured about 2,000 feet or so. So I think this is one of the things that Kyle wanted me to add, and unfortunately, Kyle, we hadn't quite gotten to it yet, but this is something we're actually starting this afternoon and remaining for this week, is how we're going to include the, again, what I'm calling the lab component or the DPSL device. And so we plan to measure, using that device, measure the dielectric values from the field cores, just to confirm what we expect to see it being the same as what we had from the field DPS device. We plan to fabricate lab pills from the loose mix that we collected during the paving. And right now we're looking at a 6-inch diameter specimen, 116 millimeters tall, and a compacted and gyratory compactor. Right now we're looking to estimate the mass to yield a series of pills of 4% air voids. And we're thinking right now, what we'll do is we'll probably also compact some pills to 2, 7, and 10% air voids. But I got a question mark on there because we haven't done it yet. And so I don't know if we really need to do those, you know, have four air void content values, or can we get away with 3? Do we want to concentrate only around, you know, where our specification requirement is, which is 92.5%? So anyway, a couple questions to answer there. But we do plan to do 3 replicate pills at each air void content. So now you can see the reason for us collecting 4 boxes. If we want to do different air void contents, we can probably do more than just the 4 we've got right here. And then we'll also go through and measure the dielectric value for each of those lab pills, again, using the lab device. So next steps, so far in 2022, we've assessed 6 projects, and we were able to get on one project where we were placing both a 25 millimeter and a 19 millimeter mix. And so this year we've got 4 different nominal maximum aggregate sizes to look at. Again, we did collect field cores and we did collect loose mix to be able to fabricate lab pills this year. And so the comparisons we want to add this year, in addition to doing the DPS dielectric value versus the field core density like what we did last year, we also plan to look at the DPS lab device versus field core density. And you can see that we expect that to be the same because essentially it's the same unit, just another antenna to add to it. So I don't expect to see differences there, but just to answer that question in case there is one. But I guess the thing that is interesting, and I don't know the answer to yet, is when we use the DPS lab-based device, is the dielectric value from that, the regression equation from the field cores, going to be the same as what we come up with from the lab pills? And so I've got, is that going to be the same? The question mark there. I don't know the answer to that. And so if anybody else has done that, I'm curious to hear what you've come up with. And again, hopefully we will be starting that work this week. So, I heard this mentioned also a couple times earlier already today about implementation. How do we do this? What will we do it? Ultimately, I wonder whether or not DPS can replace the way we accept our payments. Right now, we do that based on either cores or plugs. I think this possibility exists. We're probably not ready to go there yet, but I think the possibility is there. Also, who's the primary user? Do we expect the agency to do this work all the time, the contractor or a third party? Again, these are all kind of points of discussion for us internally. In terms of testing, back to where I mentioned earlier about coming out to the edge, how far out to the edge is everybody measuring? And let's say a third party or the contractor is doing this work, wearing my agency hat, how do I know they got close to the edge? If I'm a contractor and I suspect that I don't have good density at the edge, my cart is probably going to veer towards the middle if I'm that type of contractor. And so it's up to the agency, I think, to verify that. And I'm curious thoughts on how people look to do that. Right now, we're thinking of developing a special provision based on this work where we might incentivize both density and a density value and a uniformity value. So it could look something like a PWL spec. And we have something very similar to this in our current ride specification or ride quality specification. So we would look to mirror that just because that process has already been accepted by the rest of the agency and by contractors. And so it'd make it easier for this process to follow something very similar. And that's where we are right now. And this is my email address. So any thoughts or other things, I'd be happy to discuss any of what we've done so far this morning. Or if you have any thoughts or suggestions, please feel free to email. I'd be happy to hear from you. Thank you very much.
Oh, great stuff, Brian. Maybe go back to the last slide when we open it up for discussion here, just to make sure we hit on everything. I have some thoughts on some of the questions that you brought up, but I think it's a good idea to open it up to the group if you want to unmute yourself and ask Brian any questions about the work they're doing.
And I'm a latecomer to the meeting, so I apologize if you guys have covered this in the last meeting.
Some of the stuff we've touched on, but I think a lot of this stuff with DPS, it's good to continue to evaluate, where we're at. So yeah, so I think all relevant questions, Brian.
Great.
Yeah. Are there any questions for Brian, or did any of the questions he asked spark a response from some of the other DPS users out there?
Kyle, this is Rich in Alaska. I'll jump in on that. The right edge where you had the low density, we had that for 15 miles on a project also. And it was because the roller operator was trying to make a pretty edge. They were riding on the rumble strip with the edge of the roller to make it match perfectly instead of dropping the roller inside that lip, that hard, cold lip. So that is the solution to that issue. So there's a couple other things. I'll send you an email. We've got a lot of things on using this for acceptance and how it could be done. So I will send you some information that we've developed over the last 5 years working with this.
Thanks so much, Rich.
You're welcome. Thank you for the good presentation.
Thank you,
Brian.
Hey, Brian, this is Dai from Minda. Did you do the calibration before the testing, the device? Using
yes, we did. Yeah, do you mean the metal plate calibration? Yes, and the airwave calibration.
Not only like that, these HDPE and other the material, the new material, the GSSI sent it out.
We did not do the HDPE calibration before each testing. No, we did not.
Do you do any consistency test between the sensors? See if one within the tolerance between each other sensors?
We looked at that initially. The first project we went out, we did the core testing. I went through and measured the, at each core location. I think I picked a couple of those that were on the high end and on the low end, and measured with all 3 antennas individually. And I was within whatever the tolerance that was specified. And so to me, that answered that question.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we are currently recommending to still do some sort of a consistency check at the beginning and the end of each day, because there has been some situations where a sensor that is operating within tolerance typically for whatever reason, whether it's the metal plate calibration or air calibration that day or internal temperature of the sensor, whatever it may be, can make the sensors measure higher or lower relative to the other ones. But this is something I want to make clear that it was occurring at a pretty decent frequency with the previous generation of technology that had been coming out, but we've been seeing very consistent results lately, at least at MnDOT and what we're hearing from a lot of other users. But still, just for to feel warm and fuzzy about the equipment, it's one thing we just recommend doing, like I said, at the beginning and end of each day. And Di touched on one thing that we'll maybe talk a little bit more about later. In the past, having to do a repeat line, which is similar to what you did with just doing multiple sensors on the same core location, or a swerve test, we're kind of swerving away from that, no pun intended, with this new fiberglass material that we've been researching, that one of the vendors provided for us, is able to accomplish the consistency check of the sensors versus each other. And the other nice thing with that, it appears to do a good job of making sure the sensors are consistent from day to day. So that's just one note on that I think, especially initially when you're working with the sensors, to try to make sure they're consistent, which it looks like you did on the first project. So
would you recommend that consistency check to be done the same way then? What I described?
I would recommend, in the absence of the fiberglass currently, and this is what I'll present a bit on in the winter meeting, is what I would recommend based on the data we've seen. But that's not readily available for everybody right now. So in the absence of the fiberglass, I would, if you're doing repeat line tests, do repeat line beginning of day, end of the day. It's a little bit dangerous doing it just in the same exact spot, and putting all your eggs in one basket in terms of making sure you're in the same spot and doing repeat measurements. It should work fine. But maybe a 20-foot stretch repeat line in distance mode, we've seen success doing that way, or doing a swerve for 300 feet or more down and back is another way to do it.
Great.
So, but like I said, it's luckily or fortunately, it looks like this standardized material to make sure your sensors are consistent. That's going to be, I think, better than any of the methods we've been able to do up until this year. So
thank you.
Are there any other questions for Brian? And then Brian, are there any questions that you had for the group that you want to make sure get answered now? Or do you want to save those? Brian will actually be presenting when we do our state round robin too, in our winter meeting. So
Yeah, and hopefully there I'll have some results with the lab-based version. But I guess the question that I have now is that idea of how close to the edge do we want to measure, especially if you're measuring, let's say, an overlay project, and you've basically got free space off to the edge, the grassy median or whatever it is. How close do we want to be so we're not influencing the result versus actually getting a measurement at the edge?
Mm-hmm. At MnDOT, we're doing 6 inches centered. The sensor centered 6 inches away from the longitudinal joint. We did some area influence Fresnel zone testing, and when it was a 12-inch height with the equipment we were using, empirical and calculations suggested about a 4-inch radius of influence, and since then we're operating at 9-inch height, which should actually tighten that up a little bit, but that gives you a little wiggle room too, if, like you said, the operator isn't perfectly 6 inches away from the joint. At least we've found certainly in an unconfined edge like what you're talking about, where there's a height difference. If you get within 3 inches or so of an edge, you can get some fictitiously low readings at the edge of the pavement.
Okay, great.
Brian, this is Rich again. You might find it pretty instructive to every once in a while, just go perpendicular to the lane, go all the way across. That is very revealing, especially when you get to the joint, to watch the kind of dips you get at the joint. And that gives you a good profile. So I do it like every 1,000 feet when I'm out. I'll go 1,000 feet and then I'll do a perpendicular slice and see what's going on.
Okay, and then Brian, I'll follow up with you via email after this. But like I said, that's really good work, and excited to hear you building on with the lab stuff for our winter meeting. So thank you for sharing with the group.
Thank you very much, Kyle.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have Dennis coming up now, and he's going to kind of build on what was presented last technical working group by Fabricio. And my understanding is, one, I butchered the title for his presentation. So what's written on the agenda is more appropriately edited to what he has on the slide there. And it's also my understanding that Fabricio is going to participate in this presentation too. Is that right, Dennis?
That's correct. It's going to be a joint presentation between Fabricio to explain summarizing what he presented last meeting in July, as well as, and I'll have some questions to try to get discussion going about how do we use all the good work Fabricio did for the pooled fund.
Great. All right, I'm not going to take any more of your time, but same applies to you as to Brian. Go ahead and do the full presentation, and we'll make up the 10 minutes. I don't want to take away your guys' lunchtime, but we'll see what happens here. So go ahead, Dennis.
Okay, great. For those of you who don't know me, I'm with the Federal Administration Resource Center. I deal with quality assurance on a national basis. I'm sorry I missed the July meeting. I went through the YouTube video, and Fabricio did a great job of going through the research he did. I may back up a step to what Brian talked about. Brian, what you showed us was great. It showed the issues, the right lane, as well as truck, what I would call segregation. And that's probably something we use it for today as far as a QC tool to get contractors to get better consistency in their paving and compaction processes. But moving to this, Fabricio had a couple of different things, items within his research that he did. One was related to laboratory certification, the other was field certification. So we're going to focus on those two areas specifically and talk about what they really are and how we can use them. So I'll start out with Fabricio giving a short synopsis of what each of those are. So this is a slide from Fabricio's presentation that he did in July. So as everybody can see the presenter view then, I assume.
Yes, we see the full screen now.
Okay,
Thanks.
Fabricio, I'm not sure if you want to take it from here for a little bit to talk about the laboratory certification program.
Sure, yeah. All right, well, yeah, this was part of the research that was done at NCAT. And the first one has to do with methodology or preparing a methodology that could be implemented as a way to certify equipment in the lab and operators. So yeah, just basically just do a variability evaluation, come up with indicators that could give us an idea of how variable the equipment can be and how the operation of the equipment can affect that variability. So with these different indicators, the idea was to have like a very robust process that included several mixes with several samples compacted in the lab. Though all of those were plant produced mixes, that were compacted at 3 different levels, from 3 to 10%. And again, the idea was to come up with indicators that could, represent or give us a good idea of how good or how bad the variability, either from the equipment or from the operator, could be, and eventually be implemented, if that was the case, as a certification companion for the lab. And that the recommendation at the end was to do something like this every 6 months, once a year, just to do that verification that we already know that is needed for equipment or for operators, for any testing or any equipment. If you want to continue on the next slide, please. And in addition to that, to have a tool that could give us an indication of again, the variability and from the equipment and operators, we also found that this could be used to compare sensors and potentially identify if one of the sensors is biased with respect to the others. We did this with 6 different sensors. And of course, when a contractor or an agency is going to have at least 3 in the field and probably 1 in the lab. So at that moment, they could have 4 sensors that could be evaluated, using at least a couple of mixtures. And in this specific example that you have in front of you, that was using exactly the same samples that we used during this research. The only difference is that we shipped out all the samples to the FHWA lab, and they were able to identify one device, one antenna, that was constantly biased with respect to the others, and that's what you'll see in those two figures. So we also think that this is a good tool to help identify potential bias in the lab. So not only we have ways to come up with indicators for equipment variability, operator, but at this time, I think we can also implement this for any potential bias that could happen on any of the sensors. And we also come up with this because we wanted to see if in any case, we had to replace one sensor in the field with the sensor that we had in the lab. And we wanted to make sure that all those sensors are capable of providing us with similar results within a tolerance. So that can also be an idea, to have all those 4-6 sensors evaluated at any point in time, every 6 months, every once a year, and have them all be available in case you had to replace one in the field, or vice versa. You want to take one from the field and take it to the lab, and so on and so forth. All right, so that's the lab portion. If you continue on the next slide, please.
And we actually have some questions then before the field portion.
Sure.
Fabricio. I might start out and remind everybody, basically all states have a technician certification qualification program that they currently do for the sewer pave gyratory, as far as compacting the specimens in the sewer pave gyratory. So if a state was to use the process that's recommended here, where you compact gyratory samples at various air void levels, the only real difference is the amount of material that you're putting into the gyratory to get the different air void levels. The rest of the process is very similar to what folks are already getting certified on or qualified on as a state, depending the terminology the state's using. To start out with, second thing, at least to me, there's an AASHTO standard R61, a standard practice for establishing requirements for equipment calibration, standardization, and checks. That standard really defines this type of thing as more of an equipment check or sensor check. that you're doing, you're checking to see if all the sensors are getting similar results. It's not really a laboratory qualification process. That doesn't mean it's not valuable. It could be valuable to make sure all the sensors you have can give similar results. How long, Fabricia, how long does it take to do the full process? Is it a day, half a day, an hour to do compact all the laboratory specimens and test them all and create the equation and so forth? And you have to do it, I think, multiple times for different sensors or check different sensors.
Well, yeah, well, basically, compacting the samples is going to take the same as developing the equation for any of the projects. It can be one mix, or ideally it will be two different mixes. So you have more or wider range of airboards and not airboards, mixes with different properties. So yeah, that just compacting is going to take a couple of days. So that's part of any process. So you can just pick two different mixes from different projects or from previous projects and just keep those. And then the entire testing, it can be 1 day, day and a half with analysis included. But again, that's going to be done, or at least the proposal is to be done, once every 6 months, once a year. And again, it's just for the proposed method is for equipment and operator certification, and eventually for biased identification.
Like I said, I don't believe that for the equipment certification, the equipment certification is another piece for the field, I guess. And the question is, is it important with the fiberglass that Minnesota is evaluating? Is there a need to do this kind of rigorous process to check each sensor? That's maybe one of my questions. Obviously, if we have a new device that's put on the market by another vendor, we want to go through and get a handle on, are the sensors giving us the same result? And I guess maybe folks from Minnesota, have you seen a lot of variability in the sensors to where we want to do this on a routine basis, and from other states?
Well, I can comment on Minnesota, and the magnitude of the bias between sensors, if it's observed, is quite small in terms of what it means in terms of percent effect on your percent air voids or percent GMM, whatever you're measuring. So what I can tell you what we're doing right now. So we are measuring each specimen with a single sensor to develop our curves and do all of our conversion from dielectric to density, but we are saving those specimens and testing them with similar to what we do with the repeat line test to mimic that in the field. But to answer your question, Dennis, it doesn't appear to be a significant issue. To me, it seems like a periodic sensor check to make sure that something hasn't gone poorly with one of your sensors. So,
because if the each HDPE material is able to mimic what you're getting with an asphalt pavement, it could be some. Not sure what the rest of the group they have preference, if they have suggestions on frequency or how often to do this or when to do it. The key is we have limited staffing with any state DOT or owner. So the question is, or contractor, obviously we want to do the right thing to maximize our productivity and use of our resources.
Dennis, I'll chime in. This is Rich
Sure.
again from Alaska. I'm pretty happy with just doing the repeat line at the beginning of the day and the end of the day, and then checking the long-term drift of the sensors with the current polyethylene block that comes with it. And those things are all pre-programmed into the current software. So they take just a few minutes, and it's robust enough to satisfy our 61, in my opinion.
And just one comment before we continue. This first portion that we are talking right now, this is just for the lab testing, that the one that we are requiring to come up with the regression equation. Not to confuse that with what we are expecting to see in the field. Because we are going to have probably one device in the lab, and that device probably is not going to have to do anything what is going to be happening in the field. So just in case, I think we're jumping a little bit ahead, but just to make sure that this is just for the lab portion when we compact samples in the lab and we test them in the lab with the lab equipment to make sure that we create that regression equation. So for that, we also generated precision and bias statements just for the lab portion, not the field. The field portion is completely apart.
Maybe this is Dennis again. Maybe I should have clarified earlier. All states are part of a technician certification qualification program that includes the lab compaction of the gyratory specimens. If a state was to want to use this device with the developing the regression equation, I would think that that would become part of their certification program or qualification program on how you do the regression equation, so folks understand how to do that piece specifically, which is typically most states done on a 5-year basis. And then after 5 years, you have to be recertified or requalified. Any other discussion by any other states or contractors in the audience or vendors?
Maybe from Roger or Chuck, if there's a possibility of a fiberglass-like block for the laboratory portion that had dielectrics similar to what we see in the asphalt. Is that something that we could potentially rely on in the future as a possibility, or is there a kind of mechanistic reason why it needs to be the HDPE lower dielectric material?
Kyle, this is Roger. I can provide some feedback on that. The HDPE puck is just provided for verification purposes to make sure the equipment is working properly. There's no calibration or anything involved. The antennas are pre-calibrated in terms of time. So in that respect, they either work or they don't. And this is just for the lab setup. That's pretty much my thought on it.
And Chuck Oden from Earth Science Systems says their reference block is also HDPE. The dielectric value is NIST traceable. So
thank you. Kyle, I
Hey,
think
Dennis.
Good. Di?
Sorry, this time, can I ask a clarification from you? So did you just say this can be used as part of the yearly certification program that Federal Highway required? For
Who are
establishing.
you asking, Di?
Certified technician? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Who are you asking this of?
You.
Okay. In Minnesota, you have a technician certification program, just to make this local for at least one piece. You have a variety of certification courses and asphalt, concrete, soils, etc.
Yeah.
You have one right now for asphalt mixture, basically, where it includes a superbag gyratory.
Yep.
My take would be, if DPS is being used widely with the development of a correlation equation, that would be appropriate to add that to that current somewhere in that certification program, not as a
Yeah.
separate program completely. Because
Yeah,
folks know in Minnesota, know they have to get certified on a variety of things to be able to do the appropriate testing on projects, whether for QC or acceptance.
Very good. Thank you. Yeah, that's what clarification one from you.
So I think that would be a better approach to piggyback onto what's been in existence for 20 to 25 years or more in most every state, rather than try to create a brand new animal here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good question. Why don't we move on to the other topic then that Fabricio had talked about in his in the research on a field certification program. So Fabricio, I don't know if you want to talk about a little bit more about what you're proposing.
Yeah, and that was basically like the counterpart from the lab. The idea was to, once we have everything dialed in the lab, we have certified the equipment and the operators. Now let's move to the field, especially if we're gonna have different equipment, and that can be also be done, like we typically do for inertial profilers, and that's actually the baseline for this, or the what that was based on, since we already have inertial profiler certification programs following ours to R56. The idea is to come up with something similar, especially if there were going to be new devices and from different vendors. So basically follow something similar, to have several sections with different materials, different densities, and the plan was to come up with a methodology to measure repeatability of the device, but also to compare that the profiles obtained with the device with a reference profile. So again, it's something similar that we already have in place for inertial profilers, since we're measuring profiles. So the plan was to, well, maybe let's propose something similar and evaluate both repeatability and accuracy using a reference profile. Well, I guess that's another question that we had is how often, and who should be doing this, and for the recommendation is basically, if there's going to be something that has to be calibrated annually, so having a reference center similar to what we have for inertial profilers, that was the recommendation, pretty much.
And I think I had a slide with how you actually recommended doing that with a CSV file, a couple CSV files that then are.
Yeah, there was a tool that was generated. It was something simple. It's just basically having a reference profile and then having 10 candidate profiles, and then that the tool is going to provide us with a score that is going to tell us, if it is reproducing or something close to the reference profile, and how repeatable are those different 10 candidate profiles.
Thank you. Anything else that you want to add, Fabricio?
No, I think that's what I have at this point.
Well, thank you. I had some of the similar questions. I might start out by reminding everybody R56 with profilers was developed because profilers are also used for high-speed pavement management type information or asset management data collection that's used to determine in many states what the construction program will be like for asphalt overlays and other work, as well as reporting information to Federal Highway from an asset management perspective. So there are a variety of things that are going on behind that standard, besides this project level acceptance that's being used for smoothness. So probably one of the questions I have is, when should this certification be completed? How involved should it be given our what we're doing? And one of the follow-up question is, for the different states, how much variability have you seen between readings? So if I was doing this, do I need to do 10 readings on the same location to get repeatability for each device? Any states who want to weigh in and talk about what they'd like to see?
I don't want to dominate the
Maybe
discussion.
we have Rich or
Yeah.
Craig in Ohio, or trying to think anybody of the other states, Brian in Virginia talk.
Dennis, this is Craig. I guess 10 seems a bit excessive to me, just based on the amount that we've collected, with repeat sensor testing. I'm not sure that we would need to go clear to 10. As far as you say, when should the field certification be completed? Are you talking about timing in the year, or how often, or
How often,
both?
I guess. Really, how often? Annually? Is it less frequent, more frequent? Because we're already checking the tester another way as well. So we're talking about the piece of equipment, I think, here. The DPS device.
Yeah, that's just what I was thinking. How would we go about this? Because what we would probably want to do is similar to what we would do with other technicians, is you want to make sure that the technician actually knows how to operate the equipment, right? And then that their equipment is operating okay. So I could almost see us doing, kind of an annual roundup with technicians who want to be certified to operate, and ensuring that they know how to properly set up, run, and operate the equipment, demonstrate that to us, and then also maybe validate their equipment on some sort of a course that we've got a reference profile measured on. Hadn't really thought a lot of that through, but I guess that seems reasonable to me. Especially then we would be doing follow-up verification checks throughout the season as people are collecting data on projects to identify other equipment issues if they would come up. So
Exactly. I just wanted to briefly say, I agree with what Craig was saying in terms of maybe annually, but with the caveat being that we are doing those additional checks as part of our regular daily protocol. So for example, if we do the standardized block test at the beginning and end of the day, each day that it's used, that's at least monitoring that a certified equipment and operator is actually operating the way it's supposed to in the field.
yeah, you certainly couldn't say, oh, it's been certified annually, it's good to go for a whole year. That would be way too risky.
Hi, this is Rich from New York, and we have an annual profiler certification program in our state where we bring the equipment every year to be certified on the track. They collect that truth data with a reference profiler called a SERPRO. My question to the researchers here is, how were you planning on collecting the reference data that you're going to compare the DPS units against?
One thing we did to build on Fabricio's work is we did a couple 200-foot stretches where we actually cored every 10 feet, as you all know, using a nuclear gauge as a baseline to compare to is taking something that from Fabricio's work shows more variability than what we're seeing from the DPS itself. So we're looking into using cores to develop the baseline profile. And then we're also using that data as part of a research study, looking at the effect of changes in density with depth. So there'll be more to come on that from MnDOT.
Any other discussion from the group about the field certification program?
Is Dennis, do you see this as more simply like an agency setting a reference profile with some of our equipment and then verifying all the contractors against that, and kind of that process was kind of what I had in my head. And then to Kyle's with the cores, would that even matter at that point? Once you kind of have a reference dielectric set, why would you even need to worry about coring?
If you look at the process that's proposed by the researchers, they're assuming that everybody's using a correlation process with an equation for that location. So you're measuring density versus dielectric value, really. So I would think the Minnesota approach that they did at Minroad, that Kyle, I'm not sure if we're going to be talking about in November or the future meeting, would be a better way to do that, to take cores such as every 10 foot, so you really know what the true value of that area is, if you're going to do this, to see if you can get apples and apples of that DPS unit. And
I'm just thinking
operator
about
can set it up to have the proper heights and everything else to make sure you get accurate readings.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the logistics of that, Dennis. I mean, once the cores are cut, that area's done, right? I mean, you can't
Right.
measure dielectrics on it anymore. So, I mean, you basically have to have a site that gets paved essentially right ahead of where you're going to do this. I think
Unless it's a dry time, I would, Kyle, you can clarify in my mind, but if it's been dry for a while and the site hasn't been damaged with somebody running over, putting something a different dielectric on, I'm not sure if that could be used at a later date.
Yeah, I think this is going to take, I think we've done a good job of laying the groundwork here and thinking about this moving forward. It's definitely a subject that's going to come up in the future too. I guess before we move on, I would just say I kind of like the way Craig is thinking about this in terms of a reference dielectric profile, because at the end of the day, it's just a scalar shift, or I'm not a scalar shift, but a one-time conversion from dielectric to density. So we could use other things to put it in context about what variability in dielectric means in terms of density. But yeah, I think there needs to be more thought on what that looks like. It would mimic what we're doing with our IRI measurements if we just had a golden agency profile to compare it to. Of course, they're directly measuring roughness, whereas our dielectric is converted. So there's definitely some things we need to think about, and I think some of the work we'll present with what we find with the cores from our Minroad profiles will help inform those decisions. But sounds like we're thinking about the right things.
I kind of like using a dielectric directly versus density, where you correlated to cores for this process.
Yeah.
To try to make sure the device is reading correctly, rather than go to another correction to get it to density.
Yeah.
That's something that should be part of more of the equipment operator issue, how you develop that correlation process and all those kind of things, to me, versus the equipment piece, to separate the operator and the equipment a little bit.
Yep.
And just to add a little bit of a background to that, yeah, I agree. I think yeah, going profile versus profile is of course the way to go in terms of comparing the electric values. The original plan and idea came up also from the future, hopefully the future of the device and the technology actually is to replace any coring eventually. So yeah, we will probably would like to have coring, but at probably in a certification location, so we can continue that, but in a separate location, and not have to do that destructive testing in our projects. So if eventually we were to get to that point where we no longer are going to take cores, at least the proposed certification process will continue that, verification using cores, but in a separate location where we can actually, have some reference values. But that was part of the idea of coming up with the certification program as well.
And along those lines, Chuck Oden has in the chat a good point that, as soon as we take those cores, if that is our baseline, obviously we can't do any subsequent DPS surveys. So that creates a logistical issue of making sure all of your profiles are collected prior to the core.
Yeah, in the case of main road, everything was done in the shoulder. So that's something that just need to select the project, and yeah, we know that it's no longer gonna be available. But yeah, there are ways to develop those reference profiles.
Yeah, very good.
I think this is all I have, Kyle. Thank you.
Great. No, that is, something that we get into the discussion and the weeds a little bit, but it's not necessarily getting in the weeds, because these are kind of the details that are going to be important to making sure we have properly operating equipment out there. So I'm thinking we'll have to touch on some of these questions again periodically with this group, which is kind of the intent of the technical working group, to continue to brainstorm. And I think Brian is just sent me a direct message, which I agree with, that we might want to save the generate TWG report out questions until after the lunch break. And what I'm thinking we'll do, I apologize, I think we'll cut out 8 minutes of your lunch break, or depending on your time zone, whatever break you want to call it. And then I'd like to actually get back to our original schedule with University of New Hampshire at 12 Central, and then just add our technical working group report out discussion into the meeting format feedback, and kind of our wrap up session between 12:40 and 1 p.m. unless there's any objections from the group on that. Well, it is 12 Central, so Vanessa, unless you have anything to add, we'll probably get into An's presentation here right away.
Yeah, let's get into this.
Okay, so actually An Tran is going to be joining us from the University of New Hampshire. Joe Sias is the principal investigator of the project that they're doing for us as part of our pooled fund, and actually Adam Hand is involved with some of the work that the University of New Hampshire is doing in collaboration with Nevada. So without taking away An's time, he's been doing some great work for everyone here, and I wanted to give him an opportunity to share some of the data processing and tools that they've been developing for us. So take it away, An.
Hello, everyone. My name is Antran. I am a student from the University of New Hampshire research team. So today I am going to be talking about the tool for data pre-processing, validation, and analysis that we have been working on for the project, the density profiling system for the Pooled Fund study, with the purpose of doing a data statistical analysis and providing protocol recommendations. So here's the presentation outline. So some of the project overview, some of the important notes when using the tool, and the input modules, which includes the project details, data filtering, and data processing. Okay, so so this project, in this project, we are reviewing and analyzing the DPS field data to provide recommendations on changes to the current protocols used to collect the field data for the Pooled Fund study. And through the review and analysis of the DPS field data, one of the outcome of the project is to develop a data processing tool to process the field measure dielectric data gathered using the DPS equipment. So in this tool, some of the functionalities of the tool include data pre-processing, which consists of generating database for each project, data validation, which includes identification of outliers and missing or invalid measurements, analysis of data, which include a sense of variability check and data measurement variability. And the last one is to develop acceptance criteria. So here's some of the important notes when using the tool. So first of all, the data file and the processing tool needs to be in the same folder and open at the same time to reduce the running time. And so when using the tool, you will see that there are green cells and pink cells. So the green cells are required to be filled before any action taken place, and pink cells are optional. And so right now, the data pre-processing, so right now for the tool, you need to do some of the data pre-processing steps, and I am not gonna go into detail of these to save time. But Kyle, so Kyle will send in, we'll share a link with the tool and all the files, and then this presentation as well, which will include all of these information. Okay. And now I am gonna go to the tool itself. Okay, so this is the tool. So the first tab will be just some of the information about the tool and all the functionalities. Then in the data processing tab, so first of all, the first input module that you need to fill in is the state, agency, where the data comes from, and a project group, which is essentially the file name of the workbook that stores the data, and the kind of action that that you want to do. So first, we will go through the data filtering first. So right now there are two type of action that you can do: data filtering and then data processing. So when you click on each of them, a row for each kind of action will appear accordingly. So first we will go through data filtering. So for data filtering, this is essentially where where you can filter all the data. So the purpose of having this functionality is that when you have a lot of data, so this will be very useful to go through all of the data and apply the filter accordingly. So so to use this, so you need to specify the sheet index for filtering data. So this is where you input in a tab index of your workbook. So you can either choose to apply the same filter for all the tabs, or you can specify a tab index that you want to apply the filter to. And then once you're done with that, you can specify the criteria that you want to apply the filter to. So that can be dielectric, lateral offset, distance, percent compaction, or the measurement type. And then once you specify all the criteria, then once you specify all the criteria right here, so then you will click on add criteria. So what this does is that this will add the criteria to this table right here. And then once you are ready to process the data filtering, what this does is that it will go through all the criteria in this table in an order from top to bottom, and then it will apply the same filter to all the tabs that you specified in this cell. And then you also have the option to remove criteria from the criteria table right here as well. Okay, now we'll be talking about the data processing. So in this module, there are 4 types of data processing and analysis. So descriptive statistics, exploring missing or invalid value, explore outliers, and sensor variability check. So first we'll be talking about descriptive statistics. So same thing, you can specify a tab index that you want to run the data processing type on. So that could be for all the tab in your workbook, or it could be specific tabs. So for the descriptive statistics, so what this include is the summary statistics of the data, and then yes, several plots. So you can run this either on dielectric or a percent compaction. So when you specify the parameter that you want to run this on, you click on this, and once you click on this, what it does is that it will generate a report right here with all the basic summary statistics with all the mean, standard deviation, median, range, and all. And then it will also generate a distribution plot. So here I choose the dielectric as the parameter. So here you see the distributions of dielectrics for all the tabs. So far, I forgot to mention it. So all the tab in this workbook right here corresponding to a collection date of data. So here you can see the distribution plots of the dielectric throughout the collection date. And then there is also a plot for dielectric versus the lateral offset distance as well. And you can if you choose the percent compaction, then it will generate something similar for the compaction as well. And then next we'll go to explore missing the value. So what this does is that so this will generate a report for all the missing or invalid measurement. So missing measurements or invalid measurements in that sometime in your data set there could be some error in terms of empty cells or cells that have invalid value outside the range. So for example, so for some measurement, the time could be negative for those row. Yes. So when the program detect any row that have invalid value, so it will report right here. And then when you go to the tab itself, so for example, so here you can see that there are 6 rows of measurements that have some kind of problem with the distance measurements. So when you go to this tab, and then you go to all the way here, so there are 2 columns missing invalid value. So whatever rows that have some kind of problem with the measurement, it will a program will mark an X of those row right here. Yep. And then it will show you which measurement row have some kind of problem. And then you can determine whether you need to fix those measurement or not. Okay. So the next one in this input module is the explore outliers. So this is essentially identifies outliers in your data set. So the method that we use here to identify outliers is called quantile range. So for this method, it is essentially right here. So basically, in this method, your data set, so the quantile of your data set will be identified, and then so the default tail quantile is 0.25, and the Q multiplier is 1.5. So so the tail quantile is 0.25. What this is that it will identify the quantile values at each 25%, and then it will apply this Q multiplier to find the threshold of your data set, and any values outside this threshold right here is considered outliers. So you have the options to change these two values as needed. And as you can see right here, these cells are pink, so they are optional. And then once you have identified your tail quantile and your Q multiplier, you click on this, and then it will generate a report for the outliers, which include quantile values at 25% or at 75%, and then it will also identify the value at the lower threshold and at the upper threshold, and then the number of outliers and percent of outliers out of the total number of measurements. And similar to this, and similar to the missing or invalid report tab right here. So when you go to the data tab, so there is also a column. So the program will put in, so the program will mark in an X right here for any measurement row that that the program consider outliers using the quantile range method. And then you will have the option to remove these measurement row from your data set before you do any further analysis. Okay. Yep. Okay, and the next one is sensor variability get checked. So in this one, a report will be generated that compare the measurements of all the sensors to each other and to the measurement of the whole data collection date. So so right now we compare the S12 measurements, and then you can see that, so in this report that will be applied to visually compare all the measurement average. And then so in this table right here, I would just compare between the measurement average to of the sensor to each other and to all measurements. And then in the report, you will also see that so there will be some red cells which indicate that the difference is larger than 1 standard deviation. So for example, so in this cell right here, it is red color. So this means that the difference between the average of the second sensor for this file name and to all measurements for the entire data collection date. So the difference is larger than 1 standard deviation of all measurements for that data collection date. So the essence of variability check is done on the basis of measurement average and standard deviation. And so 2 reports will be generated. So there will be this one with all the plots. And then there will also be a summary report with just all the differences and the percent difference. So for in case that you want to so in case that after you collect the data and then you want to go through all the data collection day to see if there's anything wrong or not normal with your sense of measurement. So you can use this report to go through all the data right here. Okay, and the last one. So that is all the functionalities in the tool right now. So these the slides right here just go through each functionality, and so this will be included in the folder that Kyle has shared in the chat box, so you can check this out later. And so work in progress. So currently we are working on the data pre-processing. So this include as I mentioned, so this include a functionality to generate a database for a project. So so what this does is that it will generate a database right here that includes the data for all the data collection dates. And also another functionality is the data analysis of data measurement of variability. So what this is that it will generate a report like these that that will compare the measurement of the various yes section lengths to each other to the entire yes action or to all measurements, and then you can use these report to determine the to determine the suitable amount of your testing need to provide reliable measurement for different your purposes and associate uncertainty. And that is all that I have right now for this presentation. If you have any comments, you have feedback regarding the tool, you can reach out to one of us right here. Yeah, and that is all that I have. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them right now.
Well, thank you very much, On, for sharing that tool. So as you saw from On working his way through the various spreadsheets and analysis, all of the processing that's going on with the data is done in Excel. So that was one of the goals that we're trying to accomplish with the work that's being done by UNH. Kind of the overriding goal is to make it as easy as possible to take all this huge amount of data that's being collected and simplify how we can turn that data into information. So whether that's kind of what On was presenting in terms of whether your sensors are working properly or not, but then also now that we have this basis of processing of a processing tool that puts all the data into a filtered database, now we can start to work as a group and give feedback to On about what information we're actually looking for in our density assessment. So kind of going beyond those histograms that give us a good general overview of the density that was achieved that day, but some of the more simple analysis, whether it's percent conformance or other directions that we go with this data to be able to help states who are kind of just getting into the process, or even states that have a decent amount of experience with the data to be able to really try to reduce the amount of time it takes between collecting data on a project and providing something that's useful to the contractors or districts or whoever your client is when you use a DPS project. So with that background, of course, any general questions or comments or feedback for On, but specifically, what type of information do you think would be useful for On to include now that he's moving into more of his analysis and reporting portion of the UNH contract, and keeping in mind we have a kind of a wish list task that's specifically for this purpose going into the end of next year, where the group can kind of say, hey, this would be useful to us, you know, is that something that we can accommodate with this analysis tool? So whether it's Rich Hamilton or maybe Brian Diefendorfer, just from working with the data, or Craig Landefeld, what type of information do you think would be appropriate to be included in this analysis tool?
Hey, Kyle, I'll just add, this is Dale Peabody, Maine DOT, and I
Yep.
apologize. I missed just a few minutes of your presentation, but one thing I think would be valuable, and it's, you know, what you've done so far, I think it's pretty darn good. One thing that would be potentially valuable is being able to have a heat map or contour map, whatever you want to call it. So the information can be displayed in something other than statistics. I think having that information might be helpful, and that might be on the wish list already, but I just thought I'd mention that or reinforce that.
Okay, that that is great feedback as always, Dale, and that kind of I question whether or not this is a good topic to bring up now, but that specific question right away brings to mind the role of the tool that UNH is developing, and keeping in mind that there are other tools available that are not necessarily DPS specific, but are freely available, like Veda software. And I guess I would like to hear from this group, if not today, certainly at our meeting in the winter, for the larger group, making sure that we're strategic in directing UNH in the DPS specific tools that we want to develop, knowing that there's going to be some overlap. For example, you know, I think Brian mentioned in his presentation that they didn't take on Veda for their analysis, you know, for that specific set of analysis that they did, and what the general feeling is from the group on if it's useful, even if we are duplicating things that are already available in Veda, to go down that avenue with the UNH tool, or if we want to make sure we're steering towards statistical or plot-based analysis that is unique as compared to what we can currently do with Veda. And of course, I'm open to thoughts from the group on that too. So because of course the heat map stuff you can get from importing DPS data into Veda. So Dale, maybe if you want to comment on that first.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I know from your conversations with Ulrich and us, you know, we haven't used Veda a whole lot.
Yeah.
Recent years anyway. He's actually used that Origin Lab software to do some of this work with the DPS data, which I think has worked out well, but it does take time. He could probably speak better to how much effort it takes. I just thought I'd throw it out there, Kyle. You know, again, it would be some level of duplication. I certainly understand that.
Right. And that's where it's tough though, because it's not duplication if for whatever reason your current strategic plan for your state doesn't include Veda currently, but maybe in the future, you know, we want to be able to support, you know, all of the states at their various levels of Veda usage, of course, you know, too. So
I think we could consider that if that is something that is less yet time consuming, or in terms of accessibility as well, yeah, compared to the software that you mentioned.
Yeah. And then of course there are, you know, tools specific to the different vendors. I know both Chuck and Roger have tools that allow you to visualize color maps, whether it's a KMZ file in Google Earth too. So these are kind of the different things we want to make sure we're at least aware of when we're directing UNH on what would be useful, because I think, you know, regardless of what tools you choose to use, there's going to be a learning curve to the analysis. And one thing we've included with the work for UNH through the end of next year is supporting states. So if you have data to be able to contact ON and UNH, and the best way to learn things is to grab your specific data and work with ON to make it work for you too. So
Yes. Yes. So now that you answered that, so in the link that Kyle put in the chat box right here, so that includes the tool itself, and the presentation, and the example file, and the training data file, so you can use these and then run the tool by yourself to like to see how it works. And then if you have any further feedback, then please reach out to us.
yeah, and I don't want to push away from ideas of duplication either, because I think a lot of times these can be complementary in the sense that we try stuff out with the UNH tools, and the stuff that we find we're using more, we propose to include in a tool like Veda, and the stuff that ends up not being as useful, then we've saved, you know, the effort of trying to incorporate it with some of the more advanced you know, tools that incorporate all the different intelligent construction technologies.
Kyle, since you mentioned my name, do you mind if I add a thought or two?
I wouldn't only not mind, I would love you to add a thought or two.
Thanks. You mentioned that we hadn't done anything in Veda to date, and that's merely for self-preservation, for me trying to, you know, learn a new piece of software. So I was able to do what I wanted to do in Excel, and so that's as far as I got.
Yeah,
I did download the files from the web link that you provided in the comments, and I guess the suggestion or thought that I have, I wonder if it would be, or if maybe you have plans for this already, I don't know, if it would be good to go through and see the descriptive information that's provided in those worksheets, and try to separate out maybe what's useful to have, what's important to have, and what's nice to have. Because quite honestly, I tried to open up those files, and I think my Excel is still trying to open them because they're quite large. So I don't know if that file size is needed for everything, or if that's, you know, there's maybe just a lot of data in the example. But if it's near that file size for anything, that's going to be a lot to ask for DOT computers, which are probably not the most up to date.
that is a perfect type of comments that we're looking for, Brian. So you know, that hits on two things. So the data set that ON is using there is full coverage. We, you know, collected for full days, 9 sensor passes throughout the entire day, each of those different dates, so that it is a lot of data to throw at it. And I think your point is valid, that maybe having a group of users identify ahead of time, you know, what part of the data do we really need to drag along for this entire analysis set, which might be the difference between people using these tools or not, is how quickly between pressing a button and getting something you can use it takes, you know, especially considering the computers that some of us have at the DOTs. So that's a perfect comment, and I think something that we'll be looking at. Right on.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Kyle, and thanks, On. I don't want to, you know, put the kibosh on the work you've done, because it looks like really good work, but I too want to see that it gets used.
Yep. Ulrich or
Yes,
Rich
I would
Hamilton?
love to, based on the presentation, I found the tool to be easier and simpler. It's really easy to use, I believe. So I will definitely look deeper into this tool and we'll come up with some questions probably. One of I have in mind right now is that do we use the file naming convention to in order to be able to use the tool, or just I mean I will be interested to know how the tool work. Just do we use is offsets? I mean, I'm trying to figure out how the file are pulled into the tools that could be used easily.
Yeah, so I can speak for the file naming convention portion of it, that the idea with ON's tool is that it does not require the Veda compatible file naming convention, in the sense that the file naming is important for filtering by lot and some of the different tools that are available in Veda. The goal with ON's tool is to be able to take that data regardless of the file name and get some basic statistics and analysis done for the user. But I'd still encourage use of the file naming conventions because it's useful for other things beyond Veda. And
and I would like to add that as long as the all the data files, they have all the same format, so the program the program should work on all of them. Yeah.
So let's say we collect for example, one day we collect many files, we have, let's say 5-6 files of data. Do the tool combine those files together, or how do we do that?
Yeah. Yes. So right now, that is not a function we are available in a tool right now to combine all the data. So that is a functionality that we are working on right now.
Okay, so I'm sure many of you have a hard deadline at 1 p.m. Central. So I think this accomplished what I wanted to get done here, is to just introduce the tools that ON and UNH have been working on. And this is kind of a presentation 0 that hopefully we can build on to make sure this is useful to the various members of the pooled fund and DPS users in general. But I did want to make sure we hit on the discussion about what we want to report out for the larger group. And we've had 3, in my opinion, really good meetings with a lot of useful discussion that is going to be enhanced if we can share that with the larger group come the end of November. So with that, I wanted to pull up the current agenda for I just so we have our different topics in front of us here. So let me share my screen. And this is basically, with this last 14 minutes while I had this group together, I wanted to make sure everyone had an opportunity to give some input on what they think, either content wise or personnel wise, to be able to take. We have a full hour, plus there's some discussion timeframes during our meeting in November, December, where I think these umbrella topics will come up. So for me, with topic number 1, I think certainly some of the work that that has been done in Veda needs to be highlighted in terms of being able to see the big picture of how this intelligent construction technology fits in data analysis with some of the other intelligent construction technologies. We do have a presentation specifically on that, so that might not necessarily need to be a long thing to bring up, but I think I'd like to give at least a summary of Veda usage. Again, we're going to hit on this in one of the short presentations, but on-site information that you can get from the technology, and that's kind of those percent conformance tables and looking at the scatter plots to see low and high density locations, and then of course touch on what the UNH tool from a data analysis and uses relationship with other intelligent construction technologies. Is there any other major or minor topics that somebody would like to either bring up themselves during the meeting in the winter, or would like me to bring up, or somebody else to bring up during that meeting as a report out for topic one? Our last meeting was pretty heavy on the data analysis also. So
Kyle, has anybody else looked at using this, the DPS data along with like infrared yet?
yes, yeah, and that's part of the summary Veda usage. Those
Great.
include examples of comparing it with paver mounted thermal profile. There's examples comparing it to intelligent compaction. And again, I'm not going to spend too much time on the report outs on that, because I know our MnDOT presentation will show a lot of those examples. And then I've seen some of one of the contractors' presentations who's also going to be showing some examples from a contractor perspective of comparing DPS with thermal. But yeah, that'll definitely be included. That's a good point to bring up, Brian. Any other thoughts on what we've been talking about these last few meetings from a topic one perspective that we need to make sure we report out? Craig, any ideas that I missed?
You hit the ones I was thinking about, Kyle. I mean, Veda and the IR stuff is what we've been kind of interested in and looking at the last couple months.
Yep. Thank you. Anybody else?
Say, Kyle, this is Harold.
Yeah.
The only other item, but it's not with asphalt concrete, it's one of the standard practices that was prepared under NCHRP 10108 that has to do with using intelligent compaction from a process control or quality control tool, not acceptance, for compacting unbound layers. So it's more related to unbound layers, not asphalt concrete.
Okay, so that I don't think we'll include for the pooled fund, but I think that I appreciate you bringing that up. That there are, there's people using DPS technology for non-HMA compaction assessment. Another one I've seen is monitoring curing with looking at the dielectric and things like that. So I think it might be something worth reporting out that we've discussed, but I think it probably outside the scope of what we'll look at with the pooled fund.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yep. Thank you, guys. So with the precision, bias, and accuracy we've had, and then of course the certification type discussion, I know Fabricio has been leading that discussion, and he'll be giving a presentation to the larger group similar to what we've had with our technical working group to try to get some more feedback on that. And then of course, Dennis has been active in this. Is there any, thing other than the NCAT study? And then I'll also report out a little bit of our fiberglass results here, or at least I'd like to, for standardization. And then, of course, the NCAT study includes both lab and field. And this fiberglass is for daily field use. Any other ideas for reporting out that we've had discussions on that any of the members or any of the group can remember or would like to see?
Kyle, I don't know if Leslie and her team will be at this meeting,
Mhm.
but some of the work they've been doing with the MATC, right? And
Yep.
I know I've been part of like Mississippi and Florida and stuff like that. So maybe we want to include some of what we've seen in the field with the trailers, and then some of the work that the Turner Fairbank NDE lab is doing.
Mhm.
Of course, they were working closely with NCAT and their samples, but some of the other, maybe that would be something good. Maybe a brief FHWA report out on some of the things we're working on.
I like it. Yep. And I think, maybe what we'll do there is let them touch on the kind of big picture view here. And then I think they have 15 minutes, and I don't know if they're able to make it in person or if they're able to give you the information they want to share. Monica, you do have a 15-minute session, or the Federal Highway does, to report out some of that stuff too.
I just saw Steve's comment too. He said FHWA has a separate time for that
Yep.
on the agenda. Okay.
Yep. But this is, it's okay to still touch on these things, because part of this, the whole goal of these report outs is to make sure, we're looking at what we're accomplishing currently through the pooled fund, and then seeing what we want to do moving forward. What are the needs and how we can accomplish those things. So if there's no more comments on topic 2, topics 3 and 4, I know Rich has shared his specification, and I think that's a good idea to report out to the larger group about Rich's acceptance spec, and all these things. Having an hour total, we'll just want to be sharing kind of the big picture, what we've been discussing as a group, not necessarily having individual presentations throughout this. So I also thought the discussion surrounding use of DPS as an acceptance tool, or I don't necessarily want to say QC tool, but using DPS in a way that's providing useful information to the contractors and to the road builders, even prior to it being ready to be used as an acceptance spec. So I don't know exactly how to word that, but I'd like to present to the larger group kind of the idea that you can get good use out of DPS even prior to having a full scale, this is the data we're using for density acceptance. So maybe for lack of better words, unless somebody else can come up with something better, QC as a bridge to use for acceptance. And my thought process there is that we've had a lot of discussion about how it can be used to help with our paving operation decisions. And in my mind, the more we can justify getting DPS out there to collect data and use it for some of these examples we've shown that help with the paving operations, and even Brian gave a good example identifying the issue on the right side of the lane, and how we can get this technology out there in a QC type way, kind of eliminating the risk of using it as acceptance until we've had a little bit more comfort with it out in the field, is something I wanted to touch on there. Is there any other? And then of course, Harold may have some information here that he'll want to pass on to somebody to share, or maybe he'll be able to join remotely. And CHRP, I'll just put information. Any other thoughts here?
Kyle, this is Dale again. On the QC part, are there some examples out there now where contractors are using the information? Or
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be great to see. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was thinking here I might highlight, we have like our latest DPS digest was showing how the comparison with the breakdown roller caused the change in construction practice that improved some issues we were having at a near the center line joint of echelon paving.
Okay.
You know, things like that is
Yeah,
where you know,
I
what
did
think
see
would
that
be helpful.
digest. I thought that was great. Yeah, that's a real good example. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that'd be real important to
Okay.
to
Yeah. And of course, there's others, but some of those, just so people have an idea of, because it'll be hard to convince people to use the technology if it's not actually being used to affect paving decisions out there, of course. So, and I know we're kind of speeding up here at the end, but I want to make sure we at least get to to topic number 4. Again, Harold's NCHRP information on strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Robert's been out sick today. His whole family's sick, he said, but he's had some good, he put together a spreadsheet with some of the strengths and limitations of the technology. So we'd probably want him to report out, or somebody to report out his information. Any other ideas for the SWOT limitations, risks, research needs discussion? For the report out? Well, I mean, you guys have done a great job of providing feedback throughout the meetings, and then of course, CTC and Katie have taken great notes. So I think we'll have enough from the meeting notes that I'll start to compile some of the report out information, and then may just reach out directly to people on if I need more information on a topic they've brought up, or if ideally people would be able to, who are attending, be able to report out what we've been discussing as a group. But I appreciate all your guys' time today and on the previous meetings, because I think that might be one of the most important portions of our DPS meeting is getting the information reported out that we've been discussing. Are there any other thoughts that obviously everyone's dismissed? I've already taken up all the time, but if anybody's willing to stay over and has any other information they would like to discuss before we adjourn. Do we need to talk in general about when we would like our next TWG meeting to be? We have the larger group thing in beginning of December. We have Irv's workshop in January. So are there any proposals for the next TWG meeting timing wise? Otherwise, CTC and will identify a time frame and then send out a doodle poll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Kyle, for the pool fund user group, when do you think the next user group meeting would be?
Great question. I think it would be similar to the spring training that we did last year, where for the cold weather states like Minnesota, it's kind of right before we're starting to get paving. So that would be maybe April, May, I'm thinking time frame.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe a TWG before that.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, but I think, and Steve, maybe if you don't mind, we'll pull you in on the discussion too on when the next TWG is. But generally speaking, like Dennis said, we're shooting for every 3 months or so. We want to touch base. It's, in this case, we have a couple events coming up in the next couple months. So, so just look for our next TWG dates to come out from Vanessa, and we'll go from there. Anything to add, Vanessa or Brian?
Nothing further from me. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And we will put together a YouTube video for those who had to either jump off the call early or couldn't attend.
And thank you to the presenters. Well done, everyone.